Good evening, everyone. So today's session is genetics, and the faculty that we have here is Dr. Janal ma'am. Ma'am, you can take over and continue. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. So let's start with the session on genetics part two. Uh, I hope we have all gone through whatever we had covered in the last time. That was very core basics of genetics, and would like to start with a few brief recap about the same. So here I give you a 20-year-old man coming to your clinic. Okay, not very significant past history, and he plays rugby. Okay. He tells you that his brother died at 7 years of age because of cystic fibrosis. Okay. Can you tell me what are his chances of being a carrier? What are his chances of being a carrier? Do we have any answers? $25. Are you sure? So, if I tell you this person doesn't have any past history,
না
he's
তাড়াতাড়ি এসো
he's a 20-year-old man. Okay, either he must.
তাড়াতাড়ি বলেছো তো আর কি আর বেশি আমি টাইম দিতে পারবো না এখন হ্যাঁ
Can somebody mute themselves, or is it some doubt? Okay. So if I tell cystic fibrosis, you know it is autosomal recessive.
হুম
So the patient must have
হুম
two alleles mutated or defective to manifest the disease, and one for him to be a carrier. So here the patient is either free of the disease because is actively involved in sports, there is no past history till 20 years of age,
প্রোটিন তো
or he must be having one copy of it, right? So what is important here is out of three, he has a 2 in 3 chance. Why? Because he cannot be this, because he cannot be fine otherwise. So 2 in 3 chance of being a carrier, and this 2 in 3 becomes approximately 66, 67 percentage. That is the
হ্যাঁ
answer.
ঠিক আছে
What
অন্য
do you
কোনো দিন
have?
এখন আসলে আজকে চলছে এখন হতে পারছে ঠিক আছে ওকে অন্য কোনো দিন এসে আবার শুনবো আমি আমি তো শুনে নিয়েছি পড়ে নেবো আমি হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে ওকে আর জিওগ্রাফি ফর পেশেন্টটাকে বলুন
Yeah, because I can hear some other noise here. Okay, I told you 20-year-old rugby player. Okay, brother died of cystic fibrosis at age of 7. What is the chance that he's a carrier, right? So now you know it is autosomal recessive disorder. Okay, so it will need two genes both to be defective to cause a disease in him. Something is wrong.
Ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, two genes. It's an autosomal recessive condition, right? Now he's playing rugby, is okay till 20 years of age. So probably he is not this phenotype you have to consider, genotype. Okay. So the remaining options are either he has two normal genes. So out of the four possibilities that we usually have, one is out. Correct. So out of three, Now what remains is patient has inherited two of the normal genes, both normal genes. So that will be 1 out of 3. Or it has inherited the gene from either mom or a normal gene from dad or a gene from dad and a normal from mom. Correct? Which is again 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 for the rest of the three because we don't know the parent genotype. Correct? Now, this is absolutely normal, so can't be carrier. Correct? So for carrier, you rule out the diseased, you rule out the totally normal person. So these two can be carriers depending on the parent's genotype. So the total chance of this person being a carrier will be 1/3 by 1/3, which is equal to 2/3, which is approximately 66 to 67 percentage. Okay? Okay? Now, yeah, a little clinically oriented question, but will test your basics of genetics only. Not a very in-depth question, but it will test something that you have read in the list. So there is a 38-year woman who comes with acute onset headache. Important is it is acute, so that you narrow down your differentials. Plus deteriorating consciousness levels. Okay. History of kidney transplant in the brother, but they don't know why was a transplant done. Okay. BP is 190 by 105. Pulse is okay. GCS is 12. There is present of neck stiffness. Patients give history of 2 episodes of vomiting before coming to casualty. On palpation, you find renal masses, that is, kidneys are bilaterally ballotable, palpable, and there is renomegaly on deep palpation. Okay. You have to tell me what is the inheritance pattern of this condition. Autosomal recessive. Sure. Tell me the diagnosis. What diagnosis you are thinking of? You can unmute yourself and tell if anybody wants to tell. Acute onset headache, vomiting, neck stiffness, high BP, decreased GCS, history of kidney transplant, renal masses present. Does it click something? At least tell me the diagnosis. What do you think it is? Then we go to inheritance, no? First, you have to know what we are dealing with. Have all of you heard about something called autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, which has perianeurysms, which rupture and cause subarachnoid hemorrhage, gives acute onset headache, high intracranial pressure, so vomiting, headache, neck stiffness, correct? Has kidney cyst, so kidneys are enlarged, palpable, ballotable, presence with hypertension, right? There are mutations on PKD1 and PKD2. One is more common than two. Any doubts? How many of you were able to clinch the diagnosis correct at least? Inheritance pattern is okay. Once you memorize and practice, another good approach I would say to learn this list of dominant inherited is to practice such questions. By once you practice 3, 4 questions, no, automatically it's going to be fit in your head. This was recessive, this was the dominant, this was X-linked, this is my mitochondrial, and these things are still limited examples, so easy to remember. But otherwise, you can practice such examples a lot. I have a number of examples in a question bank with me, which we have made during our PG. So, was the diagnosis clear to everyone? Okay. I expect a correct answer for this at least. So, I have a albinism patient who is a carrier male. Okay. He marries a proper deceased albino female. Okay. You have to tell me the ratio of unaffected children to diseased children or proper albino children will be what? You can unmute and tell answer if somebody wants to tell. So albinism, male is carrier, female is albino. Albino means diseased. Huh? So what is the ratio of unaffected is to diseased or albino children? I'm mentioning children. I'm not told male female.
Ma'am, 50%.
50?
50%
Yeah.
affected, 50% normal.
No,
Carrier.
very good. Carrier, exactly. Well, that was my next question. Very good. So the normal person would not be completely normal, would be genotypically carriers, no? Correct?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Why will it not manifest as carrier then?
Ma'am, because it is recessive.
Recessive. Very good. So solve one more question like that. Sickle cell trait male, okay, marries a sickle cell disease female. Okay, you have to tell me the number of carriers here and the number of unaffected or normal children here. Here unaffected, I mean genotypically normal.
Ma'am, sickle cell is a dominant trait or a
No,
recessive
no,
trait?
no.
Autosomal recessive.
Very good.
Same like the previous question. Carrier.
Yeah, exactly.
50%
Carrier will be 2, unaffected will be 0. The rest 2
0.
will be affected, correct? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
little off the
Yes,
track.
yes.
Tell me the inheritance of hereditary spherocytosis.
Autosomal dominant.
Very good. Inheritance of cystic fibrosis.
Autosomal recessive.
Autosomal
Recessive.
recessive. Very good. Can someone tell me what is the mutation that you see in polycythemia vera? Okay, I give you an option, okay, which we will get in exam also. So you tell me after I finish writing all the options.
JAK2.
JAK2.
JAK2, very good. Any idea about other? At least one mutation? You must have heard, I'm very sure.
BCR,
Very good.
ABS.
Is
CML.
CML. Very good. Very good, huh? Very good. So one more last and then we go. I know we have to move to the next class also. So there's a 21-year-old who is coming and talking you about the risk that he is worried about if inheriting Huntington's disease. Okay. Father has recently died at the age of 43 because of progressive worsening neurological condition that led him to depression. With that, there is a history that he had rigidity, he had coriform movements. Okay. When testing, the CAG repeats for him were normal. So, what is the chance of him developing Huntington's disease?
Huntington's is autosomal dominant.
Dominant. Very good. Somebody has revised the list very nicely. Yeah, very happy. Very good. Yes. Autosomal dominant, but you have to see that we've read it something called as trinucleotide repeat disorder.
Repeats.
Yeah. So do you think this is also influential here apart with this?
Yeah.
Yes. So if do you think repeats are normal, they will manifest disease?
It will
Because
manifest.
normal repeats even you and me have, no?
Mm.
So risk of developing such diseases, which are trinucleotide repeat disorders, is proportional to the number of repeats. Okay, suppose in I have 100 repeats, a person X has 50 repeats. Okay, do you remember something called anticipation? This 100 will develop the disease early, will develop the disease in a more severe form. Correct?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So now let's start with our next this thing. So we come to DNA here. Okay. Now, DNA, the important thing is structure and replication. Okay. Now, I'll read up the slides a little later. I just want to tell you something about DNA as basics. Okay. DNA is around 147 base pairs given by Robert. It's a double helix structure in eukaryotes. Okay. It's a polymeric structure. Okay. So if I take this one strand, it has polymers, multiple monomers. Each of this monomer is called as nucleotide. Okay. This nucleotide is made up of your nitrogen base, a phosphate, and a sugar. Now, in all these monomers, this remains the same. The base changes. Okay. At the base for DNA are adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. If you know which is a different base in RNA which is not present in DNA. Okay. Uracil. Phosphate of one nucleotide will bind to the sugar of another nucleotide, forming that phosphodiester bond, which was this backbone of the DNA, right? So this backbone of DNA is held together by histone plus non-histone proteins, which together are called as chromatin. Okay. This chromatin, because our nucleus is so small, is condensed into a structure and packed into our nucleus. Okay, it's usually a 11 nanometer structure. Okay, so this is one bead. In between, there will be DNA, one bead, DNA. Okay, so this together is called as nucleosome, which is the unit for your entire chromatin. Okay, with this, there are also histone proteins, which are H2A, B, H3, and H4. They form the histone octamer in this bead. This histone octamer doesn't have H1, which is an important question. Okay. These beads on string appearance, the nucleosome, is the unit of chromatin. What is chromatin? Together, histone and non-histone proteins together is your chromatin. And nucleosome is the unit of the chromosome. Chromosome is a part of this entire DNA. Okay. In this, the genetic basis, I mean your nitrogenous bases, the sequence of a base as a three bases together is called as your genetic code that codes for a particular amino acid. But a particular sequence of bases, suppose here there is a base, here there is a base, it is not a triplet. The sequence of this bases is your gene, which is a very small unit of your DNA, and gene will code for a particular protein of which this amino acid is a part. So if you understand now, this is one code is only giving me an amino acid. Multiple such codes along the strand of this DNA is a particular gene that is going to code for a particular amino acid. Now, this double-stranded DNA is a complementary DNA. So that now we have to know that adenine binds to thymine with two bases and cytosine guanine binds with three bases. So I'll come to replication and then I'll tell you why there is some region which is rich in adenine thymine. Easier to break two bonds or three bonds? Two, right? Now, complementary strand is therefore what happens is if I tell you the sequence of this strand, you will be able to tell me this strand sequence because the pairing in DNA is this. Okay. So take down a strand and tell me what will be the complementary strand of this DNA would be. So it is A, G, T, G, C, T, T, A, C. So tell me what is the sequence for this? So you understand it is a double-stranded polymeric structure held by the phosphodiester linkage, of which there is a structure called as chromatin and histones. Chromatin, further, if you go more genetically, microscopically down, the unit is called nucleosome with histone and non-histone proteins. Then each has a nitrogenous base bounded with sugar and phosphate. Then the bases are connected. The three bases together form a code. Multiple bases together will form a gene, which is one of the, again, functional region of your DNA. So tell the complementary structure for this. Okay. So now we come to DNA replication. Okay. Now, where does DNA replication occurs? in your nucleus where your DNA resides. Okay. And when should it occur? Okay, so for cell cycle, you will do in your clinical sciences G1 S, G2, and then you have your mitosis, by which a single cell divides into two cells. Okay, so in this S phase, that is the synthesis phase, the DNA replication occurs in the nucleus. Okay, now what are the enzymes that are important in DNA replicase are helicase, primase, ligase, and DNA polymerase, very important enzyme. Helicase, ligase, primase, and DNA polymerase. Okay. Now I have these two strands of DNA with me. Okay. One concept you have to remember and then read the topic. It's going to become more easy for you. That DNA replication in us or eukaryotes for that matter will always occur from 5' end to 3' end. Okay, 5' end to 3' end. Now, suppose these two strands are very closely knitted, packed, compacted into our nucleus together. Okay, so first to replicate it, I need to separate these two strands and then synthesize a complementary strand to this and a complementary strand to this. Only after this can I say my this DNA has replicated into this. Okay, so the separation of the two strands will occur by breakage of hydrogen bonds between the bases. Okay, so these are the hydrogen bonds. Adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. Okay, as soon as you separate, for them to not come together again, you have to have some binding proteins which will let this strand stay away from this strand. So these are called as single-stranded binding proteins. The name itself tells you. Otherwise, these strands will come and stick again. Okay. So the unzipping of this DNA, the two strands get separated by an enzyme called as helicase. Okay. After that, you have a one strand, you have the another strand. Okay. Labeling is always the way I am writing. Please focus on this also. 5' 3' 3' 5'. Now I need a complementary strand to this and to the another strand. Then I will tell replicated. So that what happens now is in the new replicated strand, one strand remains parent or original strand in either of the DNA copies. Because of which eukaryotic DNA replication is called as semi-conservative model of DNA replication. Okay. Once I have separated, okay, from one end of this, there is some origin of replication where basically there is a adenine thymine rich area. Why? Because it's easy to break. In a particular part of your DNA, there will be these richer areas where actually your DNA is going to start replicating. Okay, there are multiple such origins of replication in a eukaryotic DNA. Okay, so they will start multiplication from that particular point. Okay, then the helicase will come, separate the two strands. The single-stranded binding proteins will bind to them and keep them unannealed. That is not preventing them from sticking again together or re-annealing, that is called as. Okay, so that is done by enzyme helicase and then single-stranded binding proteins. Okay, because in the nucleus, the DNA is supercoiled. Now, if you have to replicate, you have to read what is written here to synthesize the complementary this thing. Correct? So you have to break these supercoils. Otherwise, the helicase will not be able to separate them also. Plus, you will not be able to find out what is the actual sequence of that DNA. Right? So these is done by topoisomerase enzymes. Okay? What they do is they break the phosphodiester bond of DNA. Okay? But also they don't want that very continuously that your original parent DNA is also broken off. Okay? So these topoisomerase enzymes will do the function of preventing the supercoiling. Okay? Because of which now if you know, there are some topoisomerase inhibitors that will prevent this DNA replication to help further this thing, and that is why these are used in chemotherapy. Okay? There is also a topoisomerase inhibitor, if you know, which is in the antibiotics. So the bacterial replication gets inhibited. Fluoroquinolones, if you know, inhibits the DNA topoisomerase enzyme, which is DNA guidase enzyme. Okay, even topoisomerase are therefore used for cancer therapy. This is just the application part that I'm telling so that you understand better. So this is how your DNA, this thing starts initiation. Okay. After initiation, I come to elongation. Okay. So in a particular strand of DNA, after the replication starts, okay, it has to have something to start replication, no? A basic strand at least. Now these two strands I want, but it has to have some basic strand to start with and then it can go ahead. So therefore, what happens is a primase enzyme will lay down a RNA primer, okay, which will then enable your DNA polymerase enzyme to make DNA on that basis, okay, need some base to make new strands. And that is why the concept of primer comes in the picture. Okay, it cannot just start, this is on origin of replication and then replicate from here. Okay, you need some base to make a new strand basically. That is why primase comes in the picture. Okay, so this will synthesize the RNA primer in 5' to 3' direction. Then the DNA polymerase enzyme, which is DNA polymerase 3, apart from synthesizing new bases which are complementary to original strand, also has a function of proofreading. Proofreading means to read A as A only and not something else. Otherwise, the code will become wrong. Okay. So the addition of nucleotides will come from 5' to 3'. So the replication will occur from 5' to 3'. Okay, so now this is 3' I told you. This labeling has to be there, 5' to 3'. Okay, now here the replication starts from 5' to 3'. So if you understand, this strand is going to be made first, like I told you, with the RNA primer to begin with at the origin of replication to start with. So the complementary strand will be 5' to 3' for the upper strand. Okay, and this by concept is synthesized continuously and synthesized first. Whoever comes first leads the race. So this is called as leading strand. Okay, then at this strand now, because here there was a primer, there was a base, right? People with base lead properly. People with base do not have gaps. No, so same concept here. Okay, so the other strand will have laps, will have breaks. Okay, it will have RNA primer, but again here it will get synthesized from 5' to 3'. Okay, then it will identify a gap here, 5' to 3'. So in between there will be breaks and then here it will be RNA primer and DNA nucleotides. Okay, these gaps are called as Okazaki fragments. Okay, so DNA polymerase 1 will then come, remove the RNA primer. Okay, remove the RNA primer, read the DNA from 3' to 5' and synthesize in 5' to 3'. Please understand, reads the DNA from 3' to 5' and synthesize from 5' to 3'. And synthesis is in 5' to 3' direction is the most important part. Okay. Now, in your Okazaki fragment area where this was synthesized in bricks. Okay, so these break things has to be removed and all the useful part has to be clubbed together to form a continuous strand, and that is done by ligase. Ligase is joining. Okay, okay. Beyond a point, there is no unwinding remaining. All DNA is replicated. There are no more nucleotides to copy. And this is how you come to from initiation, elongation to termination of DNA replication. Okay. There's something called telomeres, I hope you all know, which are present at the ends of chromosomes that prevents your gene loss. So attrition, more of gene loss, more of telomere loss is implicated in your aging. Okay. Cells reach a particular replication limit, which is called as your Hayflick's limit. Suppose if my intestinal cell is committed to dividing only 1,000 times. So this 1,000 is named by a scientist called Hayflick. There's 1,000. So 1,001th replication is not going to occur. That is the maximum replication limit of a cell which is set in your system. Why? To prevent the telomere. So beyond this, what will happen? The chromosomal ends, which are telomeres, will get lost. They will have shortening. You will have essential gene lost basically. Okay, that is why we have the telomerase enzyme, which is a ribonucleoprotein. Okay, and also with this one important applied concept I want to say is if you know the nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors. Okay, what will happen is they will inhibit the DNA replication, and that is why these NRTIs, if you know, are used in your HIV therapy. Okay, these are applied concepts. I'm just telling you, not that they are very important MCQs, but helps us to understand things better. Okay, so something called as central dogma of molecular biology is your DNA becomes RNA becomes protein. This is called central dogma of molecular biology. Okay, RNA to DNA is called reverse transcription. This is called transcription. DNA to DNA is replication that we saw. RNA to protein is translation. Transcription, reverse transcription, replication, translation. Okay, transcription is a synthesis of your messenger RNA from the DNA template. Okay, this is the DNA template. Okay, the coding strand which I synthesized was in 5' to 3' direction, and the other strand was in 3' to 5' direction. Okay, there is a particular site which is called a region of DNA molecule to which an enzyme called RNA polymerase, which will help to synthesize this RNA, is going to bind. Okay, beyond this region, whatever here is upstream, whatever goes this side is downstream. Okay, and there are three types of RNA polymerase. RNA polymerase 1, which is primarily synthesizing the ribosomal RNA. RNA polymerase 2, which is involved in your mRNA synthesis. And RNA polymerase 3, which is important for your transfer RNA synthesis. Okay, apart from this, it requires certain activating factors, cofactors, which are called as transcription cofactors. They help you basically to stimulate and start the synthesis. Okay, so the region of the DNA to where this RNA polymerase will bind is called as the promoter region. Okay, because a region here would be proximal to promoter and upstream of the strand, this becomes proximal promoter region. Okay, so initiation, elongation, termination align similar steps like in replication or here also in transcription. Okay, there will be a pre-initiation complex. Okay, the initiation part in detail, if you want to go, there is something called as Tata box. Okay, upstream DNA region, transcription site region, that is the transcription start site. So if these are two strands, okay, here there is something called transcription start site, which will be there. Here there is a promoter where RNA polymerase will bind. Okay, so here near the site somewhere you will have a Tata site, Tata box. Okay, other than that, various cofactors, transcription factors will come and synthesize the DNA, mRNA from the DNA. Again, this will also be complementary. But you have to remember that you're synthesizing RNA. So the base here is uracil. Okay, and the important enzyme is RNA polymerase. Okay, so let's start. DNA is a linear polymer of nucleotide monomers, stores your genetic information, has a fixed backbone of sugar and phosphate units, which is nothing but a component of nucleotide, which is made up of your ribose or deoxyribose sugar, depending on RNA, DNA. So we are in DNA, so sugar will be deoxyribose, phosphate groups, and a nitrogenous base. We know the base pairing is adenine thymine with 2 hydrogen bonds, guanine cytosine with 3 hydrogen bonds, right? The free phosphate is your 5' end, which I was writing. The free hydroxyl is your 3' end. Okay, it's a double helix, double-stranded, compacted structure of DNA. Okay, so eukaryotic DNA is bound to basic proteins known as histones to form structures called as nucleosomes. Okay, the chromatin may undergo some chemical modification so that DNA may be able to slide off the proteins or be accessible to the enzymes of the replication machinery. Okay, now the first step to start the replication is this. See this strand very properly. The first step, remember what I'm telling for replication and try to understand here. Separation of the double helix structure, look at the figure. Separation of the double helix structure of the DNA molecule, which is carried out by DNA helicase. Then the single-stranded binding proteins will prevent them from re-annealing or re-sticking in simple languages. Okay. RNA primer segments are placed on this by the enzyme primase. Then DNA polymerase will arrive at the site of primer and start the replication. That is initiation, right? Then this will move along the strand, read the strand in 3 to 5 direction and synthesize the new strand in 5 dash to 3 dash direction. That strand which is synthesized ahead will be the leading strand. Okay, the other strand which is read in breaks, Okazaki fragments, the lagging strand, then the ligase will remove those unwanted Okazaki fragments and join them together. Okay. Is the picture a little familiar to you now after seeing the rough part when we drew everything and studied the replication? These things I agree are a little volatile, would require some revision, especially replication and translation that we'll be doing will require a little revision, but doable. And I would say, particularly when you're targeting an exam and such a concise system, you give time as much as is required. Okay, don't spend hours reading replication. What is required to be understood, you will understand. What is required to be there as a fact, or it is there just because the nature has made it like that, you just do it like that and move ahead to the next system. Okay. So chromatin is defined as a complex of your RNA, DNA, and protein, as I told you, right? Packaging of DNA molecules. DNA wraps around the histone proteins, making it beads on string that I showed you by drawing also, right? So higher level of DNA supercoiling creates a stage of metaphase chromosomes. The concept of H1, this is called as a linker DNA, which was not there in your histone octamer consisting of 2A, 2B, H3, and H4. Okay. Now I told you this proofreading activity so that wrong basis doesn't go. Okay. But if it goes, then your body has natural DNA repair mechanisms which if defective would cause a particular disease, which is very, very important to be remembered. Okay. So there is a base excision repair. Okay. That is mediated by a ligase 3. In your base excision repair means a base is entered differently as compared to the normal expected base in that sequence. Okay. When it becomes a nucleotide excision repair, it means an entire nucleotide is placed either extra or it is a wrong nucleotide. That is why when it is a nucleotide, it is much bulky than the base. That is why it is called bulky lesion crosslink. Whereas base is just a single base damage. Okay. So base excision repair, nucleotide excision repair, or supposing I do a wrong involvement of a base. Okay. Supposing I match an adenine with a guanine. Okay. Supposing my code for the amino acid becomes CAG and I get CTG. This is called as your mismatch repair. And there are other two repairs, homologous and non-homologous repairs, which is basically depending on your complementary strands. Okay. So you just have to remember that could be either a base repair, it could be a nucleotide repair, or it could be a total mismatch repair primarily. And what are the defects then caused because of those defects? So here very, very important are the last three things. Nucleotide excision is xeroderma pigmentosum. Mismatch repair is your Lynch syndrome. You must have heard of hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer. And base excision repair is your MUTYH associated polyposis, which is called as MAP. Okay. Now, these sequence changes in the DNA are mutations. Okay, it could be there in your autosomes, which is somatic, or it could be there in your germline chromosomes, which are germline mutations. So what could go wrong if you think logically also? That some gene might get deleted, some gene may come double. Okay, some gene can get inserted from chromosome number 1 to 4 or 4 to 20, or some in the sequence from 4 to 6 may migrate from 4 to 20, or I may have completely CAG, instead of that I may have GAC, inverted sequence. So these are all the types of mutations that you can get in the DNA mutations, in your somatic and germline mutations. Okay. Next is your RNA synthesis. If you understand now here, I had given you a similar example also. First, you look at the DNA strands, 3' to 5', 5' to 3'. Okay. So the leading strand that would be synthesized, upper strand's complementary strand, 5' to 3', will be complementary to the sequence which is given above. And the 5' to 3' strand below that you can see, the complementary strand synthesized will be 3' to 5', and that would be lagging strand. Why lagging? Because it will have breaks, Okazaki fragments, which will be removed, and the ligase will come and join and anneal them. Okay, but then if you see now, the DNA strand and the RNA strand, even they are complementary to each other. Okay, so you don't have to memorize the A, T, U, T, U, G, which is coming what. If you have given a sequence 1, you have to understand. If they are asking you what is the complementary DNA strand, you have to do it by pairing adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. If it is an RNA, you have to add uracil instead. So adenine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil. Instead of thymine, here you will have uracil. Cytosine, guanine would be same. Adenine would pair with uracil. Okay, and these the codons is nothing but your genetic code, which I told you, the group of nitrogenous bases. Okay, so these are your transcription steps. Look at the image above. So RNA polymerase will recognize a particular site, as I told you, a promoter site. Okay, it is a highly conserved sequence upstream of your transcription start site, which is called as your Tata box. Okay, then transcription initiation complex will be formed and RNA synthesis will occur from 5' to 3' direction, mainly involving RNA polymerase enzyme. Okay, once it is synthesized completely complementary to the original DNA strand, the transcript is cleaved and released upstream, which will serve as initial RNA prior to further processing. So you have to understand that the RNA that you get after transcription is the pre-mRNA, messenger RNA. This RNA has to go a post-transcriptional modification, which is itself a separate chapter. You just have to remember that modifications are splicing, capping, and tailing. Okay, there is a poly A tail that is added to the mRNA. Splicing is nothing but the unwanted portions of the sequence are removed, and that is the introns. And the exons, which are the actual coding regions, are clubbed together. Why? Because mRNA may only coding regions, if they are there, they'll help you to make a particular proper structural functional protein. If in between I put introns which don't code for any amino acid and protein further, I will not be able to get a particular continuous strand of protein, right? So you have to do that splicing, capping, and then capping is to prevent the damage from other enzymes in the nucleus and all that. And then you put a poly A tail for further protection. So this is the post-transcriptional modification that the mRNA undergoes. Okay. Otherwise, these are the primary steps: initiation, elongation, and termination. Basically, you have to remember there is a promoter site, Tata box. Transcription start site is a site particularly which is identified in each one of us. Upstream part, there is a Tata box. There is also on this side the downstream part. Synthesis again occurs in the 5' to 3' direction. RNA polymerase is an enzyme, important enzyme. For both replication and transcription, these are the 3 steps: initiation, elongation, and termination. Okay. Okay. So the steps I have written here like this. Genes contain not only coding sequences, but also non-coding sequences, which are called as introns. So coding sequences are called exons. Non-coding sequences are called introns. Right? Now, you get a primary transcript, which is made after the DNA is transcribed into mRNA, which is called as a pre-mRNA or transcript RNA or heteronuclear RNA. Okay, which is not functional because it has introns. So now I will do a transcriptional modification where I will add a poly A tail to the 3' end, remove this non-coding part which is called as introns and join the exons together, which is called as splicing. And then I add a 7-methyl guanosine cap to the 5' end. Okay, after this I get a proper functional mRNA. Okay, then this mRNA will come with interact with the ribosome. Okay, and then the ribosome tRNA complex will transfer, RNA complex will form, and then your translation step will occur. Otherwise, it is this step which is very, very important. Post-transcription modification, and after that, it will interact with your transfer RNA, and with the ribosomes to actually do the protein synthesis. Okay. There is one more thing which is very, very common nowadays. We do it for diagnosis is DNA sequencing. Okay. The scientist who has found out this is Sanger's sequencing. Okay. What is basically, it will help you determine your exact sequence of bases or exact sequence of your DNA, which nucleotide is located where, which chromosome has what sequence of nucleotides or nitrogenous bases exactly. So for modern diagnosis of many genetic disorders, we are using this Sanger's sequencing. Okay. One more DNA technique that will help you to identify the diseases which are not routinely diagnosed is your FISH, which is fluorescence in situ hybridization. What happens here is the first step is to look at the image, to make a copy of the probe sequence or a modified copy of the probe sequence that can be rendered fluorescent. Why fluorescent? So that you can easily see it and not confuse it with the actual DNA. Okay. So what happens is you have to have a probe DNA. Probe means a particular DNA which is present as a parent strand. Okay. That has to be then complementary strand has to be synthesized with the formation of new hydrogen bonds between the target and the probe, right? And then you have to add a fluorescing agent for you to identify the strand properly. So whichever site at that particular strand will fluoresce, you will help to have the detection of the site of this hybridization and exact site of the defect properly. Okay. So to visualize that probe properly, you need fluorescence. Okay. So the first step in the process is to make a fluorescent copy. Okay. You can see the 1B. You have the probes in the A. Okay. Then B, you have made a fluorescent copy. Okay. Both the target and the probe sequences should be denatured. It is necessary so that between this original strand and between the hybrid strand, there is a formation of new hydrogen bonds. Only if these new hydrogen bonds become complementary to the original strand, will they fluoresce and help tell you that this particular site is a defective site. Okay, so hybrids form between the probes and the chromosomal targets and then be detected using a fluorescent microscope. So this is your fluorescence in situ hybridization. Okay. This is not a part of genetics, but it is a very important topic as compared to your in your endocrine and other overall medicine part. Is certain enzyme deficiencies of your congenital adrenal hyperplasia. This is the way that I used to remember it. That the first step is a 17 thing. So the another part is a 21 part, and below that you have 11 beta part. So that once you know which enzyme is deficient, if you have the picturized memory of this pathway, which is very difficult to establish, so keep looking at it continuously for few days. So you know what exactly will go wrong. And in every enzyme deficiency, if you read it in theory, it would be seeming like they'll give random things randomware, but you have to understand it's adrenal. So for every enzyme deficiency, you have to characterize what happens to glucocorticoid, what happens to mineralocorticoids, and what is happening to your sex steroids. The most common enzyme deficiency anybody can tell in congenital adrenal hyperplasia out of the 4 that is there in the picture, in the table below. Can you tell out of the 4 which is the most common enzyme deficiency in congenital adrenal hyperplasia?
21 hydroxylase.
21 hydroxylase. Very good. Tell me any 2-3 features of it. See the figure, 21 hydroxylase goes deficient. What increases? Which is a marker used to identify it? If you look at the figure, what thing will you get elevated if 21 hydroxylase is not there? Where in the figure you see 20 hydroxylase?
Progesterone.
But will you prefer measuring progesterone for diagnosis or is it a little non-specific?
DHA.
DHEA. DHEA has 21 hydroxylase anywhere synthesized. Both pathways that are going to DHEA are 1720 and further metabolism is 3 beta. Can you see the middle path where there is 21 written, 21 hydroxylase? So what will increase if the 21 doesn't function? Sorry?
Cholesterol.
No. What is this? 17 hydroxy progesterone. Can you look at it in the picture? Yes. Can you see? So if my 21 hydroxylase doesn't function, will my 17 hydroxy progesterone get converted to 11 deoxycortisone? Hmm? That is the reason I'm telling you. It's possible, no? Just try to have a picturize this thing of the this pathway, so that these things, this table thing, theoretical thing, will become relatively easy for you to remember. And this is a very commonly tested topic in MRCP exams, unlike your Indian exams, where it is a relatively unimportant topic even for medicine post-graduation. But for MRCP, this topic is relatively important. So though it is not actually covered in textbooks in genetics, but I prefer to add it here for the pathway especially, because if you know the pathway, the table becomes much easier. Okay. Anybody knows what are the hormones synthesized from adrenal gland? Won't take much of your time, don't worry.
Adrenal cortex.
Sorry? Huh?
From adrenal cortex.
Huh?
Mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids.
Yes. Does glucocorticoids have mineralocorticoid action? Yes, no? They have. Okay, so very high doses of glucocorticoids will have mineralocorticoid action. And that is why in a patient of Cushing's, you may get hypertension. Okay, that is why in a patient of more glucocorticoids, you may get features of mineralocorticoid access. Telling this line to help you understand the clinical features better. So in 21 hydroxylase, if you see, the mineralocorticoid deficiency would become, because 21 is not there now, so your aldosterone would not come. Because if you see the first pathway, progesterone is not going to go further to the mineralocorticoid pathway at all. The first pathway is the mineralocorticoid, the second pathway in the middle is the glucocorticoid, and the third is the testosterone pathway is your sex steroids. Okay. So in this mineralocorticoid, if you see 21 hydroxylase not functioning, your eventual aldosterone doesn't come in the picture. Aldosterone is salt and water retention, rising the BP, increasing the extracellular fluid volume. That is why in 21 hydroxylase deficiency, if you see in clinical manifestations, you have salt wasting. Okay. I hope you understand this and read it that way. So a theoretical question, DDs of ambiguous genitalia, androgen insensitivity, 5 reductase, congenital adrenal that we saw, and mixed gonadal dysgenesis. So how do you approach a patient of ambiguous genitalia? First, obviously, in any patient, physical examination, palpation of gonads. Okay, you have to see a USG whether the patient has uterus, whether uterus is formed or it is formed but it is atrophic. Okay. Then you do for your other CH testing of 17 hydroxyprogesterone, testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, LH, FSH, HCG, karyotype, electrolytes. Okay. Then you see the gender assessment. Then you find out the cause, and then depending upon the cause, you assess for the surgery. Tell me one cause of hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism we saw last time. So the Kalman's, yes. And what about Klinefelter's?
Hypergonadotropic.
Hypergonadotropic. What other features of Kalman's do you remember?
Anosmia.
Anosmia.
Kalman's had anosmia, no?
Anosmia.
What other features of Klinefelter you remember?
Tall male.
Gynecomastia, increased chance of cancer, breast cancer. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So one little irritating thing but important is exactly what gene is mutated in which disease. Okay. Like I asked you for polycythemia vera, which was a little out of the box. So what is mutated in cystic fibrosis? What is there in sickle cell? What is there in your MEN syndromes? What is there in other neurocutaneous syndromes? What is in Marfan's? If you see the table, it is written as FBN1. What is FBN1?
Fibrillin.
Fibrillin. Very good. Marfan's is inherited as
Autosomal dominant.
dominant. Very good. So this is a list that you have to remember for which gene is involved where. Okay, so hemochromatosis has HFP gene, Fragile X has FMR1 gene, NF1, NF2 is neurofibromatosis, CFTR is cystic fibrosis, Duchenne's is DMD, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Okay, Rett gene is in your Men's syndromes, Hirschsprung disease, WT1 is in your Wilms disease, Wilms tumor, TSC1, TSC2, tuberous sclerosis, JAK2, as we saw, it was polycythemia vera. Fibrillin is in your Marfan syndrome. Okay. So just quick features of neurofibromatosis, because most of the questions would not be this simple that patient is having neurofibromatosis, tell the inheritance. They may frame it a little clinical, telling patient as so and so, there's family history of so and so. What is the inheritance pattern? Like we did for ADPKD. Okay. So these are the features that you can remember. These are certain flashcards that helps you to remember the neurocutaneous syndromes. Though covering them in detail is not a part of genetics, but this is how you remember them with the images. Though part 1 doesn't have images, stress on images also. So there is NF1, NF2 mutations. Neurofibromatosis, if you see, is 17-letter word. So the chromosome involved is 17 in neurofibromatosis. It is type 1 and type 2. What is very particular to type 2 is your vestibular schwannomas, acoustic neuromas. Okay. Apart from that, what is the other features of neurofibromatosis? If you see cafe au lait macules, okay, sphenoid dysplasia, Lisch nodules in the iris, axillary freckling, plexiform neurofibromas, optic gliomas, these are all features of your neurofibromas. Okay, this is a neurofibromatosis. These are the clinical features. So you can see cafe au lait spots, you can see scoliosis, optic gliomas, Lisch nodules, high blood pressure because it has association with pheochromocytoma, axillary freckling, bony deformities, sphenoid dysplasia, all these if patient is mentioning or question is mentioning neurofibromatosis. Okay. Then not a neurocutaneous thing, but important to remember is cystic fibrosis that we saw as autosomal recessive, CFTR gene. Chromosome involved is long arm of chromosome number 7. You have to remember the mutation which is called delta F508. What is delta? It is deletion. Okay. Deletion will result in a loss of an amino acid, right? So loss of the phenylalanine amino acid at the 508 position on the protein. So what will happen is, normally it helps to uptake the transport of the sodium chloride in the water. So if that doesn't happen, what happens? You have more retaining liquid. You have more retaining the fluid. Okay, this fluid is not able to clear out of the surface, especially your airway surface, your GI surface very clearly. So this impaired mucociliary clearance will cause accumulation of mucus, obstruction on the bronchioles, obstruction in the airways. Okay, their mucus will sit, irritate your airways, cause inflammation, infection. That is why you get pneumonias and all this very commonly with cystic fibrosis. Okay. So again, manifestations of cystic fibrosis, lung, pancreas, overall growth, gallbladder, bone, stomach, pancreas, lungs, everything is involved in cystic fibrosis. Okay. Everywhere it is not able to allow the function of the organ to occur. Okay. So it will cause infection of that part. So it could be pancreatitis. Spleen will function more instead of less. Hypersplenism, GERD, again bronchiolitis, pneumonia, bronchitis, pneumothorax, respiratory failure, mucoid impaction, sinusitis. Okay. So overall, what these the organs will not function. Pancreas will not function. Insulin will not come. Then patient will develop diabetes. Again, cilia is important for transport of sperms and everything in the male fertility thing. So it can come with aspermia, infertility. Females may develop amenorrhea. Okay. Again, sinus infection, sinusitis. Overall, your growth retardation, malabsorption, and fat soluble vitamins will be deficient, which are A, D, E, and K. Okay. Apart from that, cholelithiasis, arthritis, and because of vitamin D deficiency and other malabsorption features, patient may even have osteoporosis. So these are the features. Anything mentioning like that, they will not give you so many features to help you clinch the diagnosis, but some features would definitely be given so that you understand you're dealing with cystic fibrosis and then solve the question further. Apart from neurofibromatosis, there's one more important, another neurocutaneous syndrome, which is tuberous sclerosis. The 5 features that I've written here are extremely important in any question to help you clinch towards the diagnosis of tuberous sclerosis. Like neurofibromatosis, this is also autosomal dominant. Features are very, very important. You have depigmented ash leaf spots, Sjagren's patches over your lumbosacral region. In the butterfly distribution over your nose and the face area, you have adenoma sebaceum, subungual fibromatous, and cafe au lait spots may be seen. So a better answer for cafe au lait spots is always and always neurofibromatosis. But if a question mentions to you as an option that cafe au lait spots are seen only in tuberous sclerosis, only in neurofibromatosis, false. Okay. Apart from these peculiar features, what else you have? Developmental delay. I told you last time also something like tuberous sclerosis associated with infantile spasms, hypsarrhythmias. Okay. Gliomatous changes in the brain, rhabdomyomas of the heart, renal angiomyolipomas, and retinal hamartomas. These are all features of tuberous sclerosis. Okay. Then another thing where they can tell you as a clinical question and you have to identify and then think about inheritance and all is Marfan's. Okay, like we discussed, fibrillin defect, fibrillin F, chromosome 15. Other features you all know, tall man, cardiac defects, subluxation of lens, joint hyperlaxities, right? Arachnodactyly, all this will come to the Marfan syndrome. Okay. So Marfan's, neurofibromatosis, cystic fibrosis, tuberous sclerosis, these important gene mutations. So now the cancer genetics part, which is relatively simple part, and one important part which still requires more of your attention and little memorizing would be your protein synthesis. So the protein synthesis, PCR and cancer genetics I'll cover in the next chapter. This would be next session, which would probably be the last session on genetics. So today we covered the DNA structure, the repair mechanisms, what all types of mutations can occur, what are the steps in replication and transcription. With this thing, you don't need to do detailed thesis study on this, please. Okay, so what is FISH? What is DNA sequencing? Both are used for recent modern diagnosis. If possible, please go through this pathway before sleeping today. Okay. The imported genes, most of them are very logical and you'll be able to understand by your base MBBS knowledge. Not everything you will have to memorize in this. I'm sure 50% of the table, most of them you will be knowing. Okay, can you tell me the inheritance of Rett syndrome? I told this last time in the table. Rett syndrome. RETT, Rett. Anybody? Rett syndrome. Rett syndrome. Anybody? No? Okay. So solve this question or just put in the screen in front of you. Xeroderma pigmentosum, increased risk of skin cancer. What is the defect? What is the defect? Anybody? Come on.
Base
Huh?
excision. Base
No.
excision.
No. What was base excision? Come on, you gave me one more question to ask. Can you tell the answer now?
Nucleotide excision.
Nucleotide excision. Yeah. So tell me what was base excision?
MU.
MAP. Very good.
MAP.
MUTYH associated polyposis. Okay. What was Lynch syndrome then? Which hereditary this colonic polyposis? What was that defect? Now it is there. Option answer is there in the options.
Mismatch repair.
Mismatch repair. Very good. Okay, so this we did last time. This we did last time. Come on, do this. This we did, I think. Do this. I'll wind up very quickly, don't worry. For somebody who is gazing at the clock, I know, exceeded a little time. Do this. Question number 8. 29-year women, vitamin D resistant rickets, comes with the partner for family planning. She's worried her son is going to develop this VDRR, vitamin D resistant rickets. What best fits in this clinical picture? Any answer?
Vitamin D resistant rickets is X-linked dominant
Very good.
inheritance. So
Tell
I
me,
think
will all
the thing is like 50% of the children should inherit this disease, but none of the options are providing that kind of option actually, ma'am. So it should be E.
E. None of the children will have disease. You're sure it is a dominant thing, no? You're only telling me 50% will have disease.
disease.
The
So
option is
these
little
options are
twisted.
not really
Little
adequately
twisted.
representing the kind of precise answers that we would want to give, ma'am. That is why E.
So what is the closest that you want to give? MRCP will ask this, huh? What is the closest answer you want to still take? You cannot tell there, no? The answer is not very close to what I want, what I am thinking of. I'm telling you, it is a little twisted. That is why I didn't discuss it in the last class. You have to rule out and come to the answer in such questions. So will all female children be free of, did you draw the pedigree? Did you draw this, the chart? So tell me, will all female children be free of disease, free of symptoms?
No.
No, one would be affected, right?
Affected.
Good. It's a dominant thing, so forget the concept of carrier, no? There is no carrier. She will be affected, right? One male would be affected. So is B right? All male children will be free of symptoms? No.
No.
So if A and B are not right, that one male, one female will have disease. By extrapolation, do you think option E is right? None of the children will have disease. No, just now we told one
No.
male, one female will have disease, correct? Now the
Yeah.
answer is between C and D. Come on, tell me.
D.
Any explanation? Do you all agree with these options which I got? Because of which I'm telling you one female affected, one male affected, the rest two normal.
Yeah.
Yes? Now,
Yeah.
tell me, here, the child, here, I have told you in vitamin X-linked dominant condition, here,
Yeah.
out of the total genetic makeup, 50% is affected, right? The person still has a normal gene for some function, correct? Is the case same here?
No.
No, right? So now can you tell me?
Option D.
Option D. Please read this.
Okay. I think the reverse.
Okay. See, so wherever you're not able to get the answer direct by spinal, which you should be able to get in 80% of the questions, you have to go by this approach. Rule out which is surely not and come to 2 and then try to find the answer. Okay?
Okay.
Next. Are you people getting very late? I should discuss in the next class.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yeah, we are on fasting right now, so it's time to breakfast.
Okay, fine. Then I'll discuss it in the next class. Can I just
Thank
discuss
you.
one? This we discuss and we'll end it. 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. The question number 11 you do and we find it.
Yes, please.
Very theoretical question. You can try to read the explanation also. And if you still have something to ask, you ask. Otherwise, we wind up. But please understand, don't end it because you want to wind up. I have purposely added this question. Clear? It is all related to your genetic code, 3 triplets, addition of nucleotide, how much addition, change in the nucleotide, like a base I told you. If a wrong base is coming, it is missense. Instead of 1 base, I'm getting 2, it is repeat. And if something is coming prematurely and stopping my replication or transcription, that is nonsense. Nonsense means something is coming and stopping the nucleotide prematurely. So suppose in my standard 100 bases, my complementary should also have 100 when it is replicating. But suppose in the 88th base is selling a signal to terminate, to stop the process. So I will have only complementary 88 bases nucleotide or 88 base strand, which will be less than my parent strand because it is terminated prematurely. Such mutations are called as nonsense mutations. Okay. Some part of this I'll definitely cover in the translation in the next class, especially the last line that you must be seeing, you must be thinking, what is this? Some part of this we will cover in the next class, but I want you to tell that apart from the mutations that we saw, there's something also called as frame shift mutation, where exactly by perfectly like nature has told you 333 doesn't occur always. Suppose if I put 5, so that extra 2 will shift the frame completely, because what will happen, the next 2 is going to get added to the first nucleotide of the next base. So that will completely change my sequence, because of which it is called frame shift. Frame is getting, so these are 3, these 3, these 3. So suppose if my in the I have some disease and I get mutation, this is 2. Then these are the further 3 cases. So this 3 gets readed as a part of this code. The 2 is not getting readed because we know it is a triplet. So what will happen? It will read these 3. The first one of this. So again, the entire further sequence gets changed. Okay, the frame gets changed rather than this frame. That is why it is called as frame shift mutations. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. We'll see you in the next class.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.